How are you, Jerry?
Very good.
Good.
Patiently waiting, and I know you want to hear from Jennifer, you want to say? Okay. So I want to thank everybody for coming by and joining us this evening. We're looking forward to hearing from you. I'm going to go through just a few sort of logistics and background issues before we get underway. First of all, my name is Carolyn Copper. I'm an Assistant Inspector General for Program Evaluation at the EPA Office of Inspector General. I just happen to realize that the rest of the staff aren't here, who I want to eventually introduce. I'm so sorry. I will do my very best to get, is that better? Okay. Thank you. So what I'd like to do, we have a team here tonight. I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, but what I'd also like to do is just give you a little bit of background on what the Office of Inspector General is and how we differ from EPA. I think that's important for folks to understand. We are an independent agency within EPA. We are, in some parts of the country, physically co-located with EPA staff, but we receive our funding separately from EPA. We operate differently from EPA as well. So we are the independent organization that does oversight of EPA operations. That's a really important distinction for me to make this evening, because I know some of you may think we might make the decisions for EPA. We might direct them to do certain things, but at the end of the day, the EPA will make the decisions. We provide recommendations to them on how to improve. A couple of other highlights I think I want to mention. Many of you know that we've done 3 prior reports on the CTS site that we've also just recently announced a review on right now. I just will hold these up for you. Many of you are familiar with them. The most recent one we did was in March 2012, looking at whether EPA had completed actions that we had made recommendations on. And the good news was that they had done many of the things that we had asked them to do. But we've done a couple other reports as well, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with those. What I'd like to do is just quickly introduce the rest of the OIG staff that are here, so you know who we are, where we are, and I'll turn it over to Tina, first of all.
Hi, I'm Tina Lovingood. I'm the Director of the Land Cleanup and Waste Management Program Evaluations with the EPA Office of Inspector General.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Taplin. I'm with the Office of Congressional and Public Affairs within the OIG. Jeff Logda, who's sitting up front here, and I are both from that office, and also happy to talk with any members of the public if we can be of help in providing status updates or any information regarding the evaluation at any time.
I'm Kate Robinson. I'm also in the Office of Inspector General, Office of Program Evaluation. I am on the team that is working on the latest evaluation, and I am in the Philadelphia office.
Hi, I'm Barry Parker. I'm also with the Office of Inspector General's Office of Program Evaluation. I'm working on the evaluation team that's doing the current review. I'm located in Washington, D.C.
Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Lockton. I'm a Congressional Media Liaison. I'm based in Washington, D.C.
We have one additional team member that was signing you in and providing the comment sheet welcoming you. His name is Makari Baker. He's a member of the evaluation team and he's based in Chicago.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to stick to maybe hand-holding this for a while. Okay, so why are we here tonight? We're really here tonight to hear from you. This is a listening session for members of the we call it the CTS community, the community that's impacted by the Superfund site. We thought this would be a good opportunity for us to hear from as many of you as possible in this venue. So we look forward to those of you who are signed up to speak, and we're looking forward to your feedback and your comments. We had provided in our notice, I don't see it up here anywhere, but the specific issues, and I'm just going to grab mine, I have it right here, thank you. Thank you very much. The specific issues that we would very much like to hear from you this evening on are your perspectives on communications from EPA that occurred to you, that occurred after January 2012, and that are related to site sampling and monitoring, schedules and milestones for planned and completed site activities, site cleanup progress to date, and safeguards in place for protecting human health as cleanup activities continue. Now, the reason why we are focusing on the 2012 timeframe is that that's when the new order was put in place, and so there's a new process, if you will, underway at the site, and so we're interested in how things are going since that period in time. I do know that we've talked to some individuals earlier today. We were out at the site. Dot Rice was gracious enough to let us on her property, and we had an opportunity to speak to Barry Durand as well, and provide us with some additional information beyond the scope of the particular focus we have. We welcome hearing those additional comments, but we just want to emphasize that we have a sort of a priority set of issues that we're focused on in this particular review. I just want to help provide that for some context. Okay, let me quickly get through the rest of the issues. What I want to reinforce this evening, if I could, is we recognize that there's strong emotions and differences of opinion at the site. We're aware of that. What we would certainly like to hear is if you have comments in those areas, but we also recognize that progress has been made in some areas. And so if there are things at the site that are going well, or from a communication standpoint, that you'd like to talk to us about, we would like to hear that as well. You might be interested in knowing what we're going to do with the information that we're collecting this evening. As you can see, there's a lot of recording going on. We'll be taking notes. What we will be doing is returning to our offices. We're from different parts of the country. I'll be returning to my office in Washington, and we will be taking this information along with other information that we're collecting and factoring that into our findings and our conclusions. So we will be digesting everything, if you will, that we're hearing from folks this evening as part of the broader review that we're undertaking. I think I've got 2 final points, and Gary's going to give me the 30-second sign. A couple logistics things. So we had said in our calendar notice that we wanted folks to sign up to speak, and I think we have folks who have signed up to do that. We had indicated that we would allow 3 minutes per person, and that was really just our sense of what might be a fair time that would allow as many people as possible to speak. We had going whether 3 minutes was the right or 5 minutes was the right. It looks like we may be able to give folks some more time this evening because of the attendance that we have. So I think what we're going to say right now is we can certainly give folks at least 5 minutes, and we may even be able to have folks come up again if they would like to do that. So, I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know if you want to say anything. But we will monitor that, and if folks need some more time, I think we're going to have opportunities to do that. The very last thing I do want to say is it's very important for us that you are aware that we haven't decided to undertake this review because we have a belief that there is something currently wrong or currently not being done properly at the site. We haven't reached any conclusions about that, but we are in the process right now of reviewing what is going on. So I want to be real clear that folks understand that. And I think that does it. So, do we get to call up our first speaker? I'm Trevor.
Yes, the first speaker is Barry Durant.
Well, good evening, guys, and I want to just say again what I said earlier, how much I appreciate the fact that you guys are here today. It's wonderful to have somebody from the outside come in and take a look at this. One of the things, of course, you mentioned that I gave a little bit of context of the various investigations, and I'm understanding how you structure you didn't call them investigations, but evaluations. But you stovepipe it, which means you look at one aspect of it and you do it thoroughly. But this, and the reason why there's probably now a fourth investigation or evaluation beginning is this is a very complex situation. And there is a reason why there have been problems. And there is a history, and I realize that 2012 is your beginning point for this, but you cannot, and I hinted at something when I talked to you earlier, that I believe that the current conduct is being affected by previous conduct, and there are concerns that I have about the objectivity of the folks who are on site at this project. And one of the points I made was how unusually compliant the engineers involved in the site are with CTS Corporation. I personally, and I'm going to give you the documents when I submitted comments for the Maple investigation. It was repeated. I actually submitted them and got no comments, and I had to resubmit them a year later. But they're entirely inflexible, and essentially AMEC Corporation, which is doing all the evaluation for CTS Corporation, is giving all the technical advice to the Region 4 people on site at this site. And if you ask any of them, they always refer back to Matt Wallace or Susan Kelly for answers. And I'm concerned about the objectivity. And one of the things is Congressman Meadows and the other congressmen that came in, everybody wants this thing to move forward, right? But you cannot move forward if you don't have the proper sampling plan in place, if you haven't done the proper evaluation before the cleanup begins. And I have serious concerns and reservations about the studies that have been done, the limitations on their science, what they've looked into. I'll just give you one example. You all have a science background, I'm sure. You know how gravity operates. You know that TCE is a very heavy compound, much heavier than water. It will actually drift in the opposite direction of a groundwater flow if it's a gravitational issue. The contaminant source at this site is at the apex of a hill. And I have plenty of data to show you that no one has done a single evaluation northwest of that summit. The highest population and concentration of development in this county is in this region. Sweeten Creek and Dingle Creek runs in that direction. These folks have given no explanation to why this has occurred. And further, they've developed plume maps that are asymmetrical. And here's the really interesting thing is all the previous waste handling issues and contingency issues of spillage, because the site is mostly about, probably 2/3 of the site is sloped toward the northwest. And the fact that they actually have a contingency culvert system and a containment pond that's in Southside Village that plumes into Dingle Creek. All the concerns of improper waste disposal, although the waste disposal area was behind the building, which is on the southeast side, all the releases, we have stories, and we've told this to people on site that there were cow kills because there was a pasture down there, down Sweeten Creek. All the cows died because they had an inadvertent release of cyanide, but they haven't even evaluated the groundwater. And here's the thing, you know with data, you can't even make an assumption until you've actually taken your first data point. And they're claiming there's no issues there. So I'd like to come back to this at some point if I may, and I will let the next person speak.
Thank you very much.
So we're really clear on process, since I think we will have time for folks to come back up. Is what we would like to do is to have folks re-sign a sheet. Is that the process that we're following? Folks? So we can be sure if you'd like Barry to add on to that. Where is the car? Okay. Could you help? Could you coordinate that? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And next is Laura Carson.
Hi, my name is Laura Carson, and I live in Southside Village, which is next to the contaminated plant. We're on city water, but my concern has been the neighbors that have been on well water. And I was a part of the original Citizens Advisory Group, and we met with EPA quite a number of times, and our approach has been a little more aggressive. We tell it like it is. We, point out the mistakes and all. Well, another group has formed that did not like the way that we handled our association with EPA. So now it's within the community, it's two groups, which is basically hurting our community. And I can't give you dates or anything about that, but EPA has met with that other group and totally ignored us. We are the ones that are recognized by the Buncombe County Commissioners, and we were, authorized or recognized as the official CAG group. And I don't remember, I didn't take time to try to pull out the email, but a statement was made, well, if you're nice to us, we'll deal with you, but if you're not, we're not going to. So, and that is very troubling, because this isn't an issue where you can maintain your cool all the time. People have died, and people are still sick. The poor Rices, the Robertsons. And we do get aggravated, we do get upset, because this is taking entirely too long. And my latest little gripe is last Friday I sent a note to EPA, and my wonderful iPad respelled a word for me, and I didn't catch it. And so they wrote back, well, we don't know what you're talking about. And then I sent it right back. And I was told to get in touch with the public affairs people. Well, I didn't want the public affairs people. I wanted the person that knows the details, the engineering type. And I returned my email and said, you know, I didn't hear. Well, I haven't heard nothing back. And today is Thursday. So that's just a summary. I don't think the communication is any better. They are sending out a quarterly report. I know, you know, is it monthly or quarterly? If they send that newsletter, I guess it's monthly, isn't it? You know, the one Samantha sends.
I think you're right.
Okay. But, you know, day-to-day communication, it's not very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You reminded me as you were speaking that I forgot to mention that we have another outlet for folks to, and I know folks may have seen when they signed in, we do have I think a box for comments. Folks can put written comments. It's easier for you to get your feedback to us that way. That works. We also have just established a mailbox. Is that the best word for it, Jennifer? Okay. That's what we have up here on the whiteboard. So this is an email that you can send in any additional thoughts you have, information, if something didn't come to you this evening that comes to you after the meeting and you want to use that, you can please use that. We encourage you to use it. And so thank you for reminding me of that.
Thank you, Mary and Laura. Okay, so next is Dave Ogren.
Howdy, my name is Dave Ogren. I live on Sweden Creek Road. And to give you a little bit of background, I'm the guy that called in roughly 25 years ago. And that was a communication problem, apparently, because nothing happened. But to give you a little bit more background, I'm believing it was 2010, not to get earlier than 2012, but there was an artesian well that lost the top after the EPA was busy running cameras down into it to see which way the cracks and fissures were. And I was over there on a Saturday, and we saw the artesian well. It was coming out of the top, and it was blue-green, obviously TCE. And I called the 24-hour hotline for Region 4 and got a recording. Then I called the national 24-hour hotline, got another recording, and the EPA didn't believe me. And Senator Richard Burr, his man, John Mitchell, kept getting a hold of me even on Saturday evening and Sunday evening. Somehow, nobody believed me. So Richard Burr had someone spend just under $120,000 to find out that I was telling the truth. They even had recordings of my phone conversations. So what I'm getting at is, if we're here to discuss lack of communication, it seems to me, kind of like Laura said, I believe the EPA's job is to either notify the public or the CAG groups. Well, there's two CAG groups. Evidently, the EPA is not doing its job notifying the CAG groups, and the CAG groups are not doing their job by notifying the people. I'm a member of one of the CAG groups, and I don't hear from anybody, so I really have no idea what's going on. And that's a serious communication problem, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. It'd be helpful for us to know the specifics if you could perhaps write it down about the specific hotlines that you called. When you say the national hotline, if you can tell us the exact number, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. The next speaker, thank you, Dave, is Becky Robinson.
Hi, my name is Becky Robinson. I'm one of the original wells that was found to be contaminated. Mine is the artesian well he was speaking about. I noticed the neighborhood kids were out in the yard playing in the water. It was shooting up out of the ground. So I called Tate McQueen, which he gave me all these numbers to call. So I started calling numbers. All I got was voicemails. No one ever called me back. I can't remember who all I called. I finally ended up calling the fire department. And they are the ones that came over there and capped it off, got it stopped. But it just seems like every time they do testing, it takes them forever to get us results. Sometimes we never get results until we demand to have results. They just tested the vapors under our home, in our home, and I just find it very funny that every other person that was tested at the same time, we all had the same ratings. That seems kind of strange to me. It's just been so many years of this, and we have asked, okay, what are you going to do about testing us? I feel like they need to do some medical testing on these families, on our families, because my mother-in-law died of cancer, liver cancer, and the Rices are sick, my daughter's sick. I just feel like they need to do some testing. And anytime I ask, they just sort of, okay, we'll see what we can do. But no one has ever done it. I can't afford to go out and have all these scans and all these tests done and all these different things done. And I'm sure that, the other people around can't afford that either. And I just feel like they owe that to us, to test us, to see what type of damage it has done.
Thank you, Becky. And next is Scott Halbill. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
I live about a mile downhill from the plant, and I asked EPA very, very few questions over the years, and they've never answered any one of them that I can tell. Okay, so I emailed this about communication, and this email is, and I'll read it to you, June 6th, but it's in response to an email that I never got answered a few months earlier. So this is to Samantha Foster and Angela Miller. Okay, and the email is, please do not think I am asking these questions, again sarcastically, as I am not. I live 1 mile downhill from the CTS Superfund site and want to know the facts for obvious reasons. In regards to the latest CTS soil and water sampling results, what scientific rationales could there be for not immediately implementing the 2002 time-critical removal response to prevent continued propagation of the toxic plume emanating from the reservoir the EPA had clearly foreseen in 2002? Okay, now those levels have all come up. It's spreading, and that's just a little background. But as I understand, various EPA personnel testified to publicly, there is nothing legally preventing the agency from conducting an emergency removal action at any time. I do believe the latest tests prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the time-critical removal response called for in 2002 should now be acted on without delay. I've never got an answer to this. Now, if you're evaluators, my hope is that you can approach this like a medical evaluation team would when patients keep turning up sick and dead after medical intervention. And this is what's happened here. And this has been there must be, and you probably are very intimately involved with EPA, obviously. Are you aware of any scientific reasons for them not going back and doing what they were going to do in 2002 and have never done, is remove the source before it spreads? Now, the EPA spokesman came on the local news and said, well, we believe that it's all moved off the site, blah, blah, blah. Well, the test came back and it's exactly the opposite of what's happened.
So I just want to know scientifically what's your reason for not acting. And so I would hope that you evaluate that statement, because when they make it publicly, it gives the public wrong perceptions. And it's obviously a false statement she had made. And these have to be corrected. And, you know, it's just, I just want to know scientifically what the facts are. And if you are aware of them, because obviously you've gone through quite a bit of material, if you can answer that question, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, this is an EPA deal, but I would hope you ask them and then give a report to the community very quickly, because time critical is time critical. They warned about it, you know, a decade and a half ago or whatever, and it's gotten worse, not better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. We appreciate your feedback. And Dot Rice is next.
Good evening. My name is Dot Rice, and my family has been fully impacted by the CTS actual site contamination and the way EPA has handled this site. EPA, I may not be within your guidelines, but I hope you will bear with me and let me make some comments. EPA trespassed on our land, did testing, and didn't tell us. They found the TCE. We drank the water for 9 more years after they knew it was contaminated. By that time, my husband and granddaughter had brain tumors. Our livelihood and our lives have been taken away from us. EPA turned our property into a Superfund site without telling us. And they treated us as if we were the contaminator. We didn't find this out for years later when we found the documents. We have suffered many hardships, as most of y'all know of our family, with loss of health, property value. This was land that we had planned to leave to our children, and our 2 sons and our grandchildren. My son Terry is losing his eyesight. His doctor has stated he thinks the TCE is cause of him having the glaucoma at such an early age. If EPA had done their job of protecting us when we found the contamination in 1999 and enforced the AOC action in 2002, we feel that they could have saved our family and our community this many years of suffering. Back to the vapors. When I asked EPA to do testing of the vapors inside our homes, they refused. I wouldn't sign an easement, and they accused me of holding up the cleanup. Well, it was 2 years later, and Terry was still breathing the vapors. Finally, they wanted us to test the crawl space. Well, I kept insisting until they finally did do the testing. When they did, of course, the vapors were high, and Terry had to be removed from his home along with 2 other families. If I hadn't insisted, I don't know how much longer they would have waited to do it. In 2008, Franklin Hill made the comment at one of our meetings that the vapor levels were high and that the spring levels were very high, which we never did get the results. That was 6 years that Terry breathed the high vapors that they didn't want to test. We have exposed barrels behind Larry Jr.'s house. They have been there ever since CTS moved. We don't know what was really covered up there. They had cement trucks coming in and covering up behind the house. And Larry's house is only 50 feet from the fence. Now the barrels are exposed. We're asking that these barrels be removed, and we're also asking that they protect Larry's and his family. He has 2 boys, it's age 8 and 9. We want them to be protected while they are digging that, because we don't have any idea what is there. Like the other people, I have asked questions, I have not gotten answers. All I'm asking and begging of you is to do a recommendation that something be done towards a cleanup of the source. and I certainly appreciate all of you coming. I enjoyed our meeting this morning, and I hope that you can see what has been done to us and recommend to EPA that we have a complete cleanup at the source and a fast one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dot, very much. Okay. The next speaker is Robert Taylor.
Good evening. My name is Robert Taylor. I'm a friend of Terry Rice's, one of the 13 environmental refugees who relocated from the CTS site. It's my understanding that we are to discuss only the events that have occurred since 2012. But since I returned to the area only recently, I'm not really familiar with all that's involved since I brought this to the public's attention in 1999. Since that time, and 9 years prior to that date, when the EPA was aware of the danger to my friend, his family, and the community, and since 2012, nothing has happened and nothing has been done to hold CTS responsible for their actions. The EPA and its representatives have bowed to the wishes of the contaminator, even attempting to place blame on the Rices for delaying the cleanup. It's my belief that the EPA is a branch of our government created to protect our environment, protect our water, protect our soil, protect the air we breathe, and by doing so, protect the people. It's their job to protect us, not the corporate entity that has flagrantly violated laws that prohibit exactly what they've done and they continue to do. From the time they opened the site, and I think that was in 1957, I was a sophomore in high school. I grew up in this community. I lived here for 40 years. But they dumped their poisons with impunity, with total disregard for the health of their employees, the safety of our drinking water, and the abnormal increase of many forms of cancer attributed to these chemicals. The actions and therefore the inaction of CTS are none less than criminal. They have assaulted the Rice family, they have assaulted the community, and they have assaulted our environment. Since the passage of Citizens United allows a corporation to be considered a person, then this person should be charged as any other criminal for the crimes they've committed. They should be held accountable for the assault they committed and their callous disregard for the community and our environment. Were this evidence presented to a grand jury, I have little doubt that an indictment would be returned charging them with negligent homicide. I'll close by saying that as a citizen and a member of this community, we expect our EPA representatives to represent us, not the corporate entity that has committed the crime. We expect them to do this just as they would expect the same from any one of us had we committed this crime. The community has watched helplessly as loved ones succumb to the ravages of cancer while 25 years have passed and the criminal who committed these crimes still walks free. It's 25 years past time for CTS to clean up this mess, the one they made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Okay. Next is John Payne.
My name is John Payne. I don't live in the south end of town. I live in Weaverville. My sister lives on Concord Road, a short distance from the CTS plant. The Rices are my cousins. In my opinion, that EPA has done nothing but protect the CTS Corporation because CTS Corporation does a lot of government contracts. And I think they're all in bed together. I think if you go to the Rices, Dot has mentioned about animals on her property. You don't see hardly any birds, crows, squirrels, anything like that. And that goes back to what my cousin Bobby said back years ago. He said he had a little feist dog and he was walking the dog down beside the creek that flows from the spring. and he knew the dog was thirsty. So he took the dog down to the stream and said, "Here, Fido, get you some water." Well, Fido wouldn't drink. He said, "You little S," he said, "this is the best water around. I have it tested yearly." But he had it tested for bacteria. The bacteria couldn't live in the chemical. The dog knew that there was something wrong. And I think that the EPA officials need to walk in the Rice's shoes, walk in their shoes and see how they feel. I mean, if we were, if the shoe was on the other foot, then you'd want protection. That's all we want. Is it the EPA officials to do their jobs? If you ought to do your job. EPA has already spent $11 million flowing up from Atlanta up here, eating big meals, staying in the high-rise hotels. If this was, it happened in
the relocations, and we've got remedial investigation that's been sitting and not spinning its wheels and not going anywhere. So we feel like with another crew, we could get them both working simultaneously to work on cleanup of the source. We've got a huge source that's got L-Napple, which is at the top of the groundwater, and we've got D-Napple down in the bedrock. And I think it's very important to deal with the springs and get those folks back in their homes. But we've also got all this other contamination that need to be dealt with. So I just feel like more staff, more resources put to it so we can get all this done simultaneously and move the effort along in a much quicker manner. One of the other requests I have is that you could look into the process of disseminating information to the community. Right now, we're having to go through the FOIA process for every report and every document, and it's a cumbersome process and it's taking way too long. We had to go through the FOIA process. Our technical advisor went through the FOIA process, and it took over 2 months for him to get a report. And not only our technical advisor, but other folks in the community could be using this information to help offer critiques and input, valuable input into the cleanup process. And we're not getting an opportunity to do that because it takes so long to get the information. And it would help us with the efficiency of that process as well. And the last thing I'd like to ask about is more rigorous vapor sampling. They've done several kind of spot check samples, and I'd like to request that there be more continuous sampling because the TCE vapors are so variable with all sorts of different weather conditions, and we feel like not enough testing on a continuous basis has been done to ensure that we're finding the highest TCE levels, and we just want to make sure everybody's safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name here. I apologize. Okay, and next is James Wilson.
Good evening. I'm James Wilson. I live at 10 Gene Drive in the Oak Subdivision. First, I'd like to thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I will tell you that I heard a comment, I guess we have a little lively crowd tonight. I will tell you that I've seen this auditorium full of people, fire department full of people for years. I think our community is just getting more out with dealing with this situation. It's my understanding we're here for communication or lack of communication by the EPA. I have a well in my yard, and our community had several wells that were contaminated, and we did get city water after a long run-out fight for a couple of years. That's been a number of years ago. There's a lot of folks that still need city water. I would like for you to look into that. But in the lack of communication, my well was tested early on. It did have a little bit of TCE in it. Was tested later, and it tested that it didn't. I got both of those reports. It's been tested probably 6-8 times since then. We're probably talking prior to 2012. Never received a report. I've talked to Samantha about, hey, we've got a well, we've got city water now. There's a well here. It did have some contamination in it at one time. Does this well need to be closed? Who's going to close it? Does it need to remain open forever? Are y'all going to continue to sample it? What's going to happen? Never got any response from that. And that's really about it. I really appreciate you being here. Need to help these folks, particularly the Rices and the Robertson family. They've endured a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Okay, next is Steve Van Duen. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name again. Steve Van Duen, Dwyer maybe?
I'll get it.
Okay. Shall we skip on to the next person and come back to him, do you think? Okay. Okay, so the next one is Jerry Rice.
Thank you, I'm Jerry Rice. I'm not akin to the family, but I'm the uncle of 3 of the refugees that was moved from there. And I followed this process from the beginning. Even with the county commissioners in Duncan, I've been there since, 26 years. So I know the players, I know it before it was ever built. I know the waste management person that was in charge that used to work there, and he was in the plant supervisor, and he went to be the county's land man of contamination and burying it, and he had access to any of the companies, and he could let them dump or he could turn them away. So to me that was very huge. In one of the county commissioners, Mr. Stanley, that's on the board for 21 years, come out and said publicly that he knew the man that was the manager there, and he knew of this for years that was going wrong with the contamination when he was putting it in the sewer. So this is no secret. It's out there. If you want to really investigate this story, I've got YouTube videos, I've got other videos of these meetings. You don't have to listen to a handful of people here tonight compared to who really has spoken in the past and gave information over and over again. I'm also a board member of the Chemtronics site, the biggest one probably in Duncan County, and it's not going to be cleaned up until 2035, even if that would even be. Now, going back to communication, we've got 4 professors that serves on that board. And it's not to let the community know, it's to shut the community up. And I'm speaking firsthand. We were strong-armed into coming forth to try to get a community together. We had an EPA official at that particular meeting, I've got it on video, where they strong-armed the community in forming a committee, not one of these paid gag committees, but they forced them. And I've got it on video, and I've already told EPA attorneys and offered the video for evidence. They didn't take me up on it either. So I think they know. And I think one of the other things is very criminal. This $50,000 grant needs to be pulled and not given to communities. I think that's EPA's way of suckering the communities into things and using that against the community, and then you can't do nothing with a lot of the evidence after that. And they have conquered and divided our community here, and this money is one of the things that they've done it with. And I've got an email, I offered it at the last meeting, and where one of the EPA persons gave an email and pulled the party away from the group that we're talking about, most of them here tonight. The other group, I don't know if there's 10 people, but they got the $50,000. So I'm just kind of giving you a picture of what EPA is doing. I would ask that EPA Region 4, the whole shebang. If they ain't been there but a year or two, take them all out and start it over. EPA Region 4 is the sorriest one in the nation, and their rules are laxed, nothing like what other places have been. I think they're in the bed with politicians because you can't get nothing to move. One of the things that I have noticed, I've certainly worked with your offices in the past through the school, and we filed complaints with OIG, and we certainly know that it does work. I'll bring up the other 4 points later. Thank you. You want to be cut off in the middle.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Okay, is Steve Van Dwine back in the room? Why don't you go ahead and continue, Jerry? It seems we have time.
Thank you. On the site sampling and monitoring, the thing that I've noticed from the beginning of this process is even though the community folks that lives and knows the property and knows what's being done, when they bring up good questions, good statements, EPA has always got a way around it. And they'll say, oh, we ain't going to sample there because of this or that. But what we found here recently in what they've been testing, we found that when they went down in the well, even back when we were asking it to be tested further down, we found that they already had the data even prior to us asking the questions for things to be tested. So I don't think they're going out far enough. I don't think they're limiting it to so many, and they're dragging this thing out by offering it to 1 or 2 in the community or 5 to 7 in the community and saying we'll get back. And when they get back, my God, we ain't even got the answers to that, and they still ain't investigating further. So I think it's just like calling in an OIG. Forgive me for saying this, but it's another layer of bureaucracy. Even though you're independent, it's still another layer of bureaucracy. And whenever you put these layers on top of layers on layers, it starts adding up, and it starts the community backing off. The meetings are not scheduled in a timely manner in a way that you can really give the input. We need people with thick skin. We need people at EPA that is coming to listen, not to argue and fuss and bitch about what the community people are saying. They're fed up. You know, you've seen some of that on TV, what happens when people get fed up. We need a negotiator in that understands how to negotiate a problem. We've got a serious problem here. People are dying. It's not just one person in the community. It's more than that. You can go in the graveyards up here and see what we're talking about. Schedule, milestone, and plan and completed site activities. Well, this vapor thing that they did was a joke. They put the machinery in there, they made the TV look good, they made things look great, and let the machines sit there and sit there and sit there. And then when we come to find out, the machines wasn't doing nothing. They just boring holes and let it vapor out the top. Site cleanup progress to date. I think it's a philosophical way of dealing with the community. They think if we get the site, the building out of the way, everybody's going to be fine. If we get water lines to the house, everybody's going to be fine. I think it's a philosophical way of taking people out and giving the perpetrators the edge. CTS. Safeguards in place for protecting human health as cleanup activities continue? I don't see nothing. I've never seen a fence protect health problems. You can climb a fence. The vapor intrusions, they moved the bus stop. They moved the building, but they didn't move the bus stop. They did not investigate that either. They took the bus and went to another place to investigate the vapors. Every time you would ask for one thing, they would give you another. And you can go back and look. These videos, I'm happy to supply whatever you need. They tell the truth. They tell both sides of the story. What is unique about this? The Inca plant Champion, all the places in North Carolina, western North Carolina that we live around, the big ones I'm talking about. The same people are coming, and the engineers are the same ones, the testing people are the same ones. We have nobody to choose from that ain't in the bed with somebody else. And when we say in the bed, I'd almost say literally, because it don't bring about any results no matter what you say, same people talking. So I think the fresh faces, and how people that are willing to listen. And I think going to each individual home with some of these that knows the history real well and go over the facts of the case. Now you have to talk about 2012. What if you had surgery and it was radical and it messed your back up really, really bad? And you go to a new doctor and you say, let's start from here. That new doctor wants to know what happened. So the thing about it, you need some history here. You can't start at 2012 and take care of this problem. There's too much. And I think if you got rid of EP Region 4 and cleaned house and put new people in place and cleaned out the politicians with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to go back to Steve Van Wyk. Is he in the room? Okay. Next would be Jeff Wilcox.
Thank you. I was not planning to speak today. I would have worn pants. I'm a professor at UNCA, a hydrogeologist. I have maybe one of the few in the room. I've worked with both community groups at various times, and I'm going to try to stick to the 2012 to present and talk a little bit more about the air testing because that's what's been recent. I asked Samantha a while back, she gave me some health data, and they had run the numbers from 2008. And what I noticed in it is that it treated Terry Rice as a trespasser, which my understanding is that's based on an exposure of something like an hour per day, 50 days per year. It's safe. It's at see table 2. The table was missing. I asked her for the table, and she could not find it for me. About a year ago, I was in Congressman Meadows' office with Dot Rice and several members of EPA, and I asked again for that missing table. And Samantha said we couldn't find it. Earlier this summer, when Terry was evacuated from his home, Glenn Adams was there and said, I'll look into getting that table for you. We should have that. When I saw him again about a month ago at the power meeting that was held here, he said, I'm still looking into it for you. I'm not sure so I still have not gotten it. On January 14th, 2013, I was at a power meeting which Samantha and Angela were at. Adams was there filming too. And that was during the time when the Rices supposedly were holding up the moving forward. And at that point, I spoke with Samantha quite a bit, and I speak with the Rices very frequently. And all they asked for was testing in Terry's house. And in that meeting on January 14th, I said they would sign an access agreement tomorrow if you test the air in their house, in Terry's house. And Samantha said, well, that's not our protocol. She repeated that over, that's not protocol. Well, we can ask them if they'll do that. And by them, she meant CTS. And so, they're not willing to do it essentially because it's not in their protocol. It's not in our protocol. I said, but sometimes you just do things to get things moving forward, even if it's not part of the protocol. She said, we'll have to ask them. I spent months, with the Rices, and I was the biggest encourager, I think, of them signing an access agreement because I wanted this to move forward. And it felt like I was up against the brick wall with EPA, unwilling to do the vapor testing. Finally, last fall, I think, well, when was it that they signed the agreement? I don't know. November. In November, when they signed the agreement, part of the agreement was that they would do the air testing. Well, they did the water testing and the groundwater testing almost immediately, and then they didn't do the air testing until April. And I was on the phone with Mrs. Rice, and she said, well, I thought they were supposed to do the air testing in exchange for this access agreement. And they did not do the testing until April. Then when they did the testing, they evacuated Terry Rice, which I think justified their request in the first place. Meanwhile, if you look at the community reports given out that are coming from EPA, and you look at some of the media interviews that have been done, it's very, very frequent that Samantha has blamed the residents and has said there's been a delay caused by residents unwilling to give access agreements. I would say the delay was caused by EPA being unwilling to collect air samples. That's how I would word it, and I feel that blaming the residents has been a terrible communication strategy for EPA, especially the residents that have been most harmed by this. That is a terrible form of communication. I have a couple other things if I have time. In terms of other communication, we have, at one point, residents were told that they would receive water lines, and that shifted to whole home filtration units. And I don't know that any of us have gotten an adequate answer as to why that shifted in terms of water lines to whole home filtration systems. And some of the residents resisted that, I think because they weren't told why. What was the shift? Why did they negotiate? That's seen as negotiating with CTS. And CTS says, well, we don't want to pay for water lines. And EPA says, okay, we'll put in whole house filtration systems. Finally, I asked Samantha about the DNAPL report when we were at Terry's house waiting for him to be evacuated. He was waiting to get home from work. And I said something about how can AMEX report say there's no DNAPL there? There's 1.1 million, 20-something feet below the ground. And she said she wasn't quite sure. Give me 10 seconds. She wasn't quite sure. And then at the media session, when they explained the vapor testing, Mike Mason asked about that very thing, about the DNAPL, and she said, well, whether it's LNAPL or DNAPL, it doesn't really matter. And that strikes me as that's incredible. I can't believe that as a hydrogeologist that somebody would even say that. It makes a complete difference in terms of how you clean it up, how you address it, and how you sample it, getting to what Barry said earlier. And so I think we have real questions about the credibility and the competence of the crew that's working on it now, and we would like to see some new people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Barry Durant.
One of the things that keeps coming up, and we talk about CTS not doing the job to do the cleanup, but the one thing that CTS has been able to say all along and has said, we're doing everything EPA is telling us to do. And they have. So yeah, CTS did this, but the folks in Region 4 who knew about this, let me just say this, the 2002 order was time critical, and time critical meant a 6-month response period. And I have here, and I'm going to give you my little report here on my exhibits, but Exhibit 7 is a very interesting one because it shows the aerials of the property, CTS site, over a course of years. And Southside Village, which was built on the site, as you know, was not a concern in the sense that, because they had drinking water brought in, and they were built upgradient from the site. In 2002, they broke ground on the lower end, the downgradient portion of the site. CTS had given 2 proposals for cleanup. One was the SVE system, which cost $600,000 or so. That was the estimate at that time. And they actually prepared a proposal for soil excavation at an estimated cost of $6.5 million. Now, we do not know why that time-critical enforcement did not happen, because the urgency was expressed extraordinarily. It suspended the requirement for an engineering evaluation and a cost analysis under the statute. And it was calling for a 6-month timeline. October, Southside Village on the lower end begins to break ground down there. I don't know, but I speculate that that may have had some issues when they did their health and safety evaluation and whether they could do a soil removal at that point, because there would clearly be runoff issues. And since I'm limited in time, I do believe that all the mistakes that you've heard of, which are enormous, I would just mention one that I didn't mention this morning, which I wished I had. In 2007, when I got involved, Miss Rice had tested her spring box. She used to have a spring box herself, and she got 293,000 parts per billion in that testing. Blew her, the lab away. They were just blown away. She calls Susan Kelly and Matt Wallace at MacTech Corporation. They refer her to Terry Tanner, the temporary on-scene coordinator, I guess, because he wasn't there very long. And he told her, just keep the kids away from it, don't worry about it. Nobody from EPA ever came down to evaluate or to verify that. Now, why that happened was we found out that CTS had a site participation agreement to brownfield that site, and we believe it was very close to completion, and EPA did not come down. I mean, wouldn't you think 293,000 would trigger some kind of a visit? But I'm going back to why all of this didn't happen. All of this didn't happen because Southside Village started to get built on the site. And the reason why I'm telling you that it's present and relevant today is that they, and I brought it up earlier, they've never sampled northwest of the summit, which would be a logical scientific evaluation to make. And it's particularly important because the creek runs that way, all the water, shallow groundwater runs in that direction, and there's a development right there. And they've been mum about it. They've said nothing about it. You cannot make an evaluation about whether something's contaminated or not if you've never evaluated it. And one of the things Mrs. Rice, when she was asked to put wells on her property, we requested that they also put wells on the other property. They never required the downgraded portion of the CTS site to be sampled, groundwater. And anyway, so there is an issue here where I told you that I think EPA Region 4, and I'm just saying this particular branch, Don Rigger and the people who were originally involved in the site are compromised. They're compromised in the sense that they don't have the moral authority to tell CTS its business, because CTS surely knows what we know about the failures at the site. And their lax enforcement, and there really requires a new team to come in, because there is corruption from that point of view. And I think that's what the Office of Inspector General's role is, to look at fraud, waste, and abuse, and this is abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We only have one more speaker that's signed up so far, unless we have any more. Bakari?
I'd like to ask one more question.
Okay, just 1 second. So we have Mike Mason is the last speaker. And then we can go back to, if after that, if Steve Van Dwyne or Glenn is in the room.
And is there a time limit? I just got here, I'm sorry.
5 minutes.
Okay, my name is Mike Mason. I'm an investigative reporter for ABC News here locally in Asheville. I began working at this local station last April, so I've been here a little bit over a year. And I just came here tonight to see how many people were here, and I was surprised to see very few. But then all of a sudden I started thinking about it, and it makes perfect sense to me why there's very few people here. There's been a lot of meetings and a lot of talk. And when we were asked to report this latest community meeting or listening session, and told that it would only be about the investigation that the OIG has opened up regarding issues that happened after a certain point in 2012. The message that sent to me personally, and I would believe other people in the community, is we're doing this because we just want to make you happy. We're going to look into a little bit of this, not everything, and we still haven't wrapped up the other investigations. But we're looking into some new stuff, so we want to hear from you. You know, and that's why I think that you're not seeing a lot of people here right now. I wasn't even going to stop by. I usually cover the story. I just wanted to say, ever since the day I moved here, all I heard about was CTS. I've done some big stories. I've won the biggest awards that you can win in the country. I've done well in my industry. So I finally looked into it. I worked on a story, looked into this issue for 6 months, and I did a 1-hour special, my first 1-hour documentary special, 68 minutes actually, called Buried Secrets, and we aired it. And it kind of had a timeline on what happened at CTS through the years when they were open from 59 to 86, and how people started finding out that their streams or their drinking water was contaminated with DCE and TCE, but they didn't know until 9 years after the EPA knew. It all sounded crazy, but I put together this cohesive documentary. Franklin Hill, who's the regional Superfund director, who is the Superfund director for Region 4, admitted that they knew in 1990 that the water was contaminated, yet didn't tell anybody, yet he didn't have an explanation. I was told about an ongoing criminal investigation that had been sparked, I don't know, the year before. Asked about that. Was told, oh, we're wrapping that up. It should be done pretty soon. Anyway, November 18th, Buried Secrets airs. The story comes out, you know, to the point where it was last November. It was either right before that or right afterwards, but I remember some OIG investigators came and spoke with Tate McQueen about the criminal investigation. And he said, yeah, they told me that they wrapped it up, that it's closed, that there's nothing that they could find, and it's a done deal. So I start calling my contacts at the OIG's office, and I confirm that they say that. They said, okay, we investigated, we didn't really find anything to substantiate a lot of these criminal claims, so it's done. But that complaint, that case hasn't been closed, it hasn't been released to the public. After our special, instead, I contacted Gina McCarthy's office. I mean, I contacted everybody I can, the president. And I said, please watch this. What are you going to do about it? It took a long time for Gina McCarthy's office to acknowledge even receiving my email. I had to get congressmen and lawmakers behind me before that was acknowledged. But finally she did. She said, I watched your special and I turned it over to the OIG's office, and they're considering how to handle this in their investigation. So I thought maybe there's a glimmer of hope. Well, since then I haven't heard anything. The only thing I know is that on August 5th of this year, Gina McCarthy was in the hot seat when she went to the House Oversight Committee meeting, Oversight on Government Reform meeting, and Congressman Meadows and McKenna even had some pointed questions this time. It was amazing. And they were asking her about the CTS site, and she said she didn't know anything about it. Well, first of all, I had given her my documentary where she said that she had seen months before, but it just shows you, do you guys really care? I mean, do you really care about what's going on here? There's people dying. There are people literally dying in this community. You know, and it has been taken to the national level with the Supreme Court case. You know, and when Gina McCarthy was in that hot seat in that oversight hearing, I may have been hallucinating, but I thought she promised to take action and look into it. I'd like to know if that's happened, you know, because I keep asking the questions and I keep telling people what the updates are on the CTS situation. You know, if the OIG's office was really investigating, wouldn't they be interviewing people? Wouldn't they be asking questions? You know, the only question that I have is, do you guys really care? Are you doing your jobs? Is this a dog and pony show? I mean, seriously, talk to the people, go to their homes, see their kids dying, just go out there as a human being.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, we do care. Yes, we're here. We're not here because to make you happy. We're here because we have a job to do, and we're committed to that job, and we're committed to that mission. Is Steve Van Duen here?
I think he said he was going to speak.
Oh, he's not going to speak anymore. Okay. So we have run through all of the speakers. Sure.
Okay, we're here till 8. We have a room till 8, so we will happily allow people to come forward who would still like to speak. So, Barry. And Jerry, did you want to?
Yeah, Jerry. You go ahead. I'll follow. Can we get...
Again, I guess, I do appreciate that you're here, and I think, obviously, the role of the Office of Inspector General is to help deal with functional problems, failures at the agency, and not to give this surface attention. And I believe this case, you mentioned it earlier, this is the first site that you know of that there have been 3 OIG investigations that you know of. And the thing that I try to explain, and the thing that's difficult here is there's this larger context. It's not just the particular item that you're investigating. There's a reason for all of this. There have been failures by some persons, we believe, at Region 4. I don't know why Don Rigger, when he signed his first AOC, crossed out 57 acres and put in 9 acres. He tried to redesignate the size of the site when it's historically known to be 57 acres. When Southside Village, when they responded in 1999 to Bob Taylor's call, and they brought city water to the Rices and to the Robertsons, the Southside Village was just beginning to break ground. And whoever road came on site about that time would have seen the excavation taking place. That must have been a very scary event for people whose responsibility it was to try to clean up this site or to address this problem. And we don't know why, and I know you've got some, because McQueen's made an issue about it, but it is significant that you have created a new CERCLA ID for 273 Mills Gap, which is the Rice property. When CTS of Asheville existed, and the interesting thing was they went through 2 name iterations. They first called it CTS Asheville, because the parent company had acquired the property, but then they made the decision to call it Mills Gap Road Groundwater Contamination Site, which is a nondescript name. And their data sheet that was on the website at that time, which I have screenshots of, actually had fields in it that said no corporate link, none, alias, none. And so there was this creation of a site that, had anybody investigated, would have seen no connection to CTS Corporation had they looked at the paperwork, not come and walked the ground. And so we do believe that all these oddities, whether it be Terry Tanner not responding to the 293 in Mrs. Rice's Spring, whether it be the Tagabus never going on the Rice's property when they brought the Tagabus up here at a cost of $60,000, there has been an effort somewhere in Region 4 to try to make this go away and to cover something up. And that is why the folks who are directly involved in this are compromised. Their judgment is compromised. And I have all my correspondence with Samantha Foster about the NAPL investigation. Why aren't you sampling here? I've given you information. that there was an old oily road that used to go on the west side of the property. Did you ever speak to Mark Taylor about that? No, they did nothing. All they did was take what CTS was planning, their engineers had come up with. There are areas of that property that were never sampled. And so we don't think there is even objectivity, but as Dr. Wilcox pointed out, we really think there's a problem with competence too. We think the CTS engineers are who are assigned to the site, far more competent than the EPA people assigned to this site. They're really dictating things. But there are other issues that are very concerning, which I brought to you about the vapor issue with Mrs. Rice. And we worked very hard from 2007 on. We spoke with David Dorian. That's when he first sampled the Rice's property indoor, and we asked for repeat sampling. But we'd finally gotten a concession from Carter Williamson to bring the Tagabus up or do something under the emergency response and removal branch to evaluate Mr. Rice and the residents on that property. They were going to do it, and then when Carter Williamson was removed himself from the site, Samantha did an about-face and changed it and gave it to CTS Corporation, as we talked about, to do under the 2012 January AOC, which you talked about as the beginning point of this investigation. Thanks.
Thank you. Jerry?
Thank you very much. I know it's hard to come and really listen. That's one of the things I've done for years, is I have to listen. I do a lot of talking sometimes, but I have to listen. The Lord made us with 2 ears and 1 mouth. I seem to have 2 mouths and 1 ear. But, I want you all to know, you don't know the Asheville area well unless I'm not knowing where you come from. But, it's unique. I questioned the health department on this. I haven't got an answer. When hospitals are non-profits, they don't have to give out anything. Government can get it, but it takes them a pretty good time. But here in Asheville, we have one of the largest cancer centers in the state. Wow. Such a little 140,000 people in Buckham County, or maybe, I think, 140,000. Now, why would that be? That's a health concern. Why? How did they get the numbers in order to build this center? Where's the statistics at that they arrived at from? I think that would be a question that would lead to some of these other things that we're talking about on this site. Now, it's already been iterated about these 2 circulus numbers. I think that is really criminal. The other thing is that how many sites in Buncombe County that I know of that have went from 50 acres, 100 acres, down to 10 acres? How can you take a mountainous terrain of fractured rock bed and say it's on 10-acre site? This goes back to that little philosophical way of dealing with the public. Public relations with EPA sucks. Because what they come in to do is to calm the fears. They don't want these outspoken people like we got here. We country people. You ain't gonna tell us something and then get by with it. We're gonna hold you to the fire. Because that's the way we're taught. Honesty, integrity. And that means something to us. You can take her money, you can take her car, you can take whatever, but don't take her integrity. We're people with integrity, and we're gonna fight for it. We're gonna fight for liberty. And I think younger people like that. You might have to work with bureaucracy, but I think younger people like that. And I know how it falls, because I've spoken to a lot of people that worked on the inside, and they say, well, I can't say it. Well, no, you can't say it. But you believe what I'm telling you. Now, let's take it from here and go forward. If there's justice to be done, the slab needs to be removed and the contaminant dealt with immediately. Don't come back and say we're testing out yonder. That's one of the things that bothers me greatly is these EPA folks, and they're all in cahoots together. Even the new regional guy, he come in, I'm sorry, but the black gentleman, I don't know his name, it's a head man, he's right in there with him. He's talking. And that bothers me that he would come in, you'd think he'd be neutral coming in. No. He's coming in saying the same thing they're saying. So and when they come here, they get in their little car and they go with a certain group of people. They don't go with everybody. So it's almost like, you're segregated out right from the start because we're mouthy people. They don't want to deal with us. We have to go to Applebee's and eat by ourselves, So if we eliminate the source under the building, that will tell the community that somebody is serious about what they heard. But if you come back with a bunch of paperwork again, and you start telling us we got to map out a new road, we're going to tell you you're just a bunch of politicians, because that's what they do. You know when a politician is lying? Have you ever heard of that? When their lips are moving. Now, that's what we've been getting, is lip service. We have got the professor, we've got other people, and let me tell you, there ain't no man in Buncombe County that touches lives like I do. Been here a long time. And I'm in there with a lot of research people, medical people, and all, when I'm dealing with special needs children. And I know a lot. Whenever you have this many people that I know telling me on the side, I know this is the worst thing I've ever seen in CTS. This is countywide. I think there's something serious about that. This ain't just talk. This is real when you start head people from all this level up to down saying this behind the scene. Now, I would like to see that the community colleges and community other people somewhere focusing all that energy together, because our professor here, he is a wonderful guy. He's got a good knowledge, good base, and we need to utilize that with the EPA and don't be ignoring it. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Joe. Did you want to speak again? Okay.
Barry mentioned about at one point we were requesting certain samples to be collected. When those were not collected afterwards, one of the things that we were told was, well, they had to negotiate those with CTS. So when we requested them and then they were not collected, whether it's fair or not, it gives the impression that EPA is siding with CTS. Like I said, whether that's fair or not, I'll say on a positive note, Samantha has always returned my emails. But one of the community groups had a meeting at I think it was the beginning of June, and I spoke at that one. EPA was not represented at that community meeting, but they sent out, I was on my way to the meeting when they sent out one of their community updates. I don't know if that timing was planned, but a little bit later, the other community group held a meeting here and gave Samantha and gave EPA, actually they were requesting anybody to speak from EPA. And one of the people they thought was going to talk was Glenn Adams, and he never got up and spoke at all. And Samantha got up for about 3 minutes and didn't say really anything. And some of the residents on their way out, in fact, the news clip after was, well, we didn't learn anything new at this meeting. And I thought that was partly because this was the opportunity to learn something new. And I think EPA brought 5 people up here. And that was their opportunity to communicate anything with the community. I think that I was very excited or very happy that when they moved the residents out, because I thought this was EPA finally putting, we're going to start doing something. We're going to bill CTS for this. And I just want to say I hope that continues. And going forward, the recent, they gave, I think, a 30-day deadline. In previous rounds, there have been 90-day deadlines, and you know how that works. The report comes back, and EPA marks it up and sends it back and gives them 90 days, and then they give it back on day 89, and they have 90 days. And I'd really like to see going forward, the 30-day, I believe AMEC and CTS know what to do, and I believe they know how to do it. And I believe that if EPA asks them, or not just asks them, but requires them to do it, I believe they are capable and will do it if pressed hard enough. And so I would just hope that, I hope this is actually just the start of EPA being more forceful with CTS and getting this cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to speak again?
I've only got 3 fairly small points. One of them was the EPA was doing quarterly testing on all the wells, and then when they started trying to go after and get everybody to take a whole house filter, they said they were going to keep on testing. Well, I happen to have a well, and I'm within a half a mile of the CTS plant, and the last time my well was tested was over 2 years ago. And early in June, suddenly the Buncombe County Health Department wanted to get into the act to get a little bit of credit, so they put out that they would test anywhere within a mile. In fact, they've changed it now to 5 miles. And I was one of the early ones that was tested, and it took 3 weeks to get the results, and that's fine. But it was wonderful. What the EPA was doing was when they would get a result of something positive, whatever it was, the next quarter, they would not test for that. They would delete that. And I got that from talking to a lot of people who had their water tested. When I got the results from the state that the Buncombe County had sent out, I got a cover sheet and 6 full 8.5 by 11 pages of every chemical you could ever imagine and whatever it was in the water and non-detect. And I mean, they did a thorough job. It was wonderful. So that takes care of that. Non-communication. Nobody ever said they weren't going to test, so there we go. In the beginning, when Representative Moffitt got his job 2 years ago, he said he had 3 plans in mind. And his 3 things for the CTS site, and he also lives within a half a mile of the site, was 1, get the building tore down, which he pulled that off and found the money somehow and on. Number 2 was putting in the water lines. Samantha said that she was going to handle that and on. Well, I don't know where that went, but it got dropped. Moffitt handled that, and the county is currently paying for it, and he's working on finding money to pay off the county, and it's very complicated. I have no idea how he pulled it off, but he did. And his third thing was, at some point before he leaves office, he's going to have the entire 9 acres dug up and hauled off to South Carolina, where they want that kind of stuff. I guess they process it down there. And he has the dirt lined up to fill in the hole. Now, recently, I heard that in one of Samantha's newsletters, I believe it was, said, oh, this is so complicated, getting everything dug up, and what will we do with it? And then we'd have this hole. It's all been taken care of. Moffitt's got all that stuff lined up. We could be digging tomorrow. And he's got 9 acres, 50 foot tall of dirt ready to go in the hole. So that takes care of that part. Number 3, I really do feel kind of bad for your turnout here. But in the beginning, well, 2 things. I just got a letter about it this afternoon in the mail. So that's 1. I did get an email earlier. Number 2, I was personally thinking that you guys were here more representing the EPA. And I say that kind of, this is a little backwards. When they went to do their studies on the CTS property, they started out by calling it confirmation studies, confirming that their vacuum cleaner worked. Not a matter of, let's do something and see what we did. No, we're going to confirm that everything is fine. And we were thinking that you guys are here to confirm those guys had done a good job. I got the feeling this morning that wasn't how it was going to be. So part of your crappy turnout, you can blame me. I'm the guy that sends out the emails and gets everybody here. I did not do that. And the reason I didn't was I thought, if we have a crappy turnout, you guys lose. And if you have a good turnout, you think you have a successful meeting. And I didn't want that if it was going to be patting the EPA on the back. So I have to apologize. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak?
I'll just say we have 10 minutes left, so if there's no one else who wants to speak, we would certainly want Barry to take the last 10 minutes, it looks like.
Can I just ask to say one thing?
Absolutely. Would you like to come forward?
In the area too, you know.
Please come forward now, because I know Barry.
Just one quick, one quick.
Okay.
That communication thing. I finally get a chance to meet somebody.
Come on up to the mic up here.
Okay. I went to a meeting a couple months ago.
Hey, could you
Had a
say
chance
your
to
name?
meet somebody. My name is Byron Hovey, live in Forest Run Drive. You can go out to my driveway and look down and see the oaks at the bottom of the road, is what were condemned. So I'm up the hills, and well, not much danger, but it's, you know, where it can move around. So it's not that far away. The wells were closed down, and I think it's city water, and now we're going to get to. But, you know, so for a long time I wondered, well, like everyone else is here, why can't something be done? When is it going to be done? So when the EPA said in our local newspaper that the plume was found as the source of the contamination, it's out spread to the wells. I said, well, they're admitting that that's the problem, or said they confirmed that's the problem. So I went to the meeting a couple months ago, just down the road here, and I asked Samantha, she's a very nice person, never met her before, I sent emails and stuff. I said, so how is it going to be cleaned up? I'm not trying to be sarcastic, I'm just asking. Now that you know it's there, you can use sort of announcing that it's there, and that's the source of contamination. And she said, well, we don't know, sort of thing. So we're still trying to find the best way to, the best technology to do this. So, well, it does sound kind of dangerous. So I'm still left with the question is that what's being done to find out how to remove this, and when is it going to happen? She said she didn't know, you know, and they were still trying to find the best way to do it. That was the only answer she had to me. So when I finally got to ask somebody that I'd heard from about for years, after they had announced publicly in our local paper, there's where the source of it is, what's going to be done? I mean, she didn't have any answer, you know, and I heard him, and that's okay. I said, well, that's fine, I understand finding the best way to do something, but that was at least 2 months ago, wasn't it? Yeah, and I haven't heard any answers yet. And people are still, you know, waiting and worrying, sort of thing. So I thought of that one question while I was sitting there. I actually asked somebody in person, and haven't gotten any answer. And she knew I asked her, you know. I told her who I was. She remembered my name. And none of us have got the answer yet, you know, right? About that question. You know. How is it going to be done, and what's the plan, and what are we doing to find out about how to do it? Very, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank you. Please.
I don't know if you had a chance. I wrote a letter to Gina McCarthy, and basically, if you've studied, I don't know if you've taken a look at the 2002 Memorandum for Enforcement for a Cleanup, the time-critical document. It is so specific in terms of what it calls for, what it predicts, the urgency it expresses in terms of, you know, it was a recognition that the contaminant was at a topographical high, it was likely to migrate. That's why it was time critical back in 2002. And one of the expression points were the springs. And one of the things that has been blurred by Region 4 on this one is when they say they're now responding to the RICEs on a ERT response basis, they're dealing with a point source where somebody's has a direct exposure issue. But that document was so broad and encompassing that it dealt with the source, not just putting a vacuum system or a filtration system for the air on the Rice property, but it actually followed all the way up to the footprint of the building, as Dr. Webster, who drafted that document, called, and extending outward toward the springs. Everybody knew that the source, and even asked Dr. Wilcox, we have not yet had a bell curve happening. It's been a steady level of refreshment of contaminant in the springs. It's indicative of a present source that's continuing to move off the site. And the truth of the matter, and the reason why I brought out sampling to the northwest that they've never done, is until they contain the source. Anybody who knows anything about TCE, the only time you get it is when you know where that source is. When it gets out there, it's sort of Humpty Dumpty. And the concern, we know that CTS realized that they could run the time clock out on this. Eventually, their contaminant would be everywhere. Isn't that interesting? That's one of their corporate logos. We are everywhere. You couldn't trace it back in a fractured bedrock system to the site. Because how could you do that? You don't have a normal type of a plume, like a smoke plume, where you can trace it back to where the fire is. And so the issue here is still that source. And one of the good findings in this recent investigation is that they did find 1.1 million parts per billion in the similar location that they found back in 2001. They need to address it in the same spirit that that document was originally addressed. It still has the potential to migrate. It still is migrating. That's why we're finding it in more places. And it's a challenging technical thing because the time lapse, because it was supposed to be time critical. But they need to contain it from migrating. And it is a glaring omission that they have never sampled. And we stood at the gate today, and I was pointing out, and I'll show you on the map, where MacTech Corporation has determined where the groundwater divide is. Half the groundwater goes this direction. How can you not sample in another direction? And we have air samples that they did in 2009. They've done. That was the same time Terry Rice's samples came up high. They sampled over in the Southside Village area, the Duckett Powell properties, which I call as the slough, the wetland that's in front of the site, of the homes. And those levels were relatively high as well in ambient air. But in this recent sort of media-driven rush to do some air samples, they only did one sample over there. They're avoiding it because it goes back to the central issue where they goofed up way back when, and they don't acknowledge the problem. But I'll just say one observation I've made with this. I do believe that if you have a few people who aren't doing their job right, it influences others, and it's like contamination. Other people get involved, they have to back them, whether it be their superiors and or anybody else. And unless you actually deal with the issue objectively and address it, I do think you have a systemic problem with some proportion of the division. I'll say Don Rigger is a person I would indicate. But here's what I want to relate to and why it's relevant today. You now have a new administrator who was just recently appointed to Region 4. I'm concerned because I think this is what happened with the previous temporary administrator. She deferred all her information to the Superfund director. She doesn't know what's going on. And I feel badly for the new administrator if she takes charge, has to take responsibility for it, and this stuff doesn't get rooted out. And I will say also, if you have people making some of these decisions as they have at this site, it might be a bellwether to how they're handling other sites in this 8-state region. Remember, this is the largest, at least geographically, division of EPA. And it's important, and a few people can affect a lot. So anyway, that's the end of it. I do really thank you for coming, and I do feel like you are people with a fresh perspective. I told you that I'd gone to some EPA conferences and met EPA people from other regions. I found a different attitude, and I don't put a blanket statement on all EPA. I think it always comes down to bad apples, and that they exist everywhere, and I think we have an issue here, and I hope you will investigate that. Thank you so much.
You have time for one more?
Absolutely, we can do that, sure thing.
I filled out a FOIA request for all communication between EPA and CTS. And what I got back was nothing. It was, well, that's privileged information. I don't know if that's true or not, because I don't see it's a litigation thing between the EPA and CTS. And I would like to, if you're doing an evaluation, I think it's critical for you guys to get that information, all of it. And because people have mentioned Don Rigger, Franklin Hill, there were sourcing coordinators. Since EPA works for the people, ostensibly, the people have to know what are they communicating. What's the communication back and forth? Is this some big giant secret? Shouldn't be. Should be open so people know. Because nothing on this site would have ever been done if people in this room weren't doggedly pursuing it. And I mean, absolutely nothing would have been done. And so I would like to see you look into that. And I will fill out another request. I'll be very specific with it. And I would hope that if you have communication with the EPA, that you will convince them to release it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, would you like to?
I'm just after today. Could you kind of tell us what your plan is and how long it will take?
I sure will speak to that. Let me do one more check. Actually, I don't know if we even can be here past 8 o'clock. We didn't check on that, and I'm sure we'll maybe be given the...
Ain't nobody come to throw you out.
Okay.
Pay the taxes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Any other final folks? Yes, sir. Sure.
Could you also state your name, please?
Yeah. My name is Ed Benside. I live in Hidden Valley. Anything that came to mind sitting here is, last meeting we were told that August 11th the CTS had a deadline to submit their plans. On Samantha's last email a couple days ago, saying they received those plans and they're reviewing those. At this stage in the game, in the trust levels, why can't EPA dictate saying that we don't trust your plans and what you want to do to this site? We have requirements. We're going to tell you what needs to happen. CTS already has proved that they're not going to voluntarily do the right thing. So why can't the EPA dictate this is what needs to happen? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sir, would you like to come up? Thank you. Just kindly state your name when you...
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Randy Simpson. I'm Randy Simpson. I'm new to what's going on here. I'm collecting facts for a freelance newspaper article. And the reason they asked me to do this, I have experience as an environmental consultant and background. I worked in the 90s. And the industries I work for were scared to death of the EPA. When they bought us, said you're out of compliance, we talked about what compliance meant, but we got in compliance. I'm in rooms with EPA, $80,000, $90,000 fines. I was fortunate to work for companies that did clean up, did get in compliance. All this is brand new to me, that a company can get away so far with what they've been doing. And to go back, a lot of that chemicals probably done before EPA existed, when it's perfectly legal to straight pipe your waste on creeks. We need to remember that as well. And but during the 90s, I traveled all over the country. I met with, I call them an EPA SWAT team. Met them in New Mexico. And they said, we're here to take all the files out of this building. I called the president of the company. They said, yes. And for 3 days, we went through all the files, gathered them together, and EPA took them. And there were significant fines and things that were paid by that company. All I'm saying is EPA does have teeth and has had teeth. And I just see these people want to see something. Thank you.
I see one other person who'd like to speak. Thank you.
Hi there.
To your question.
My name is Bethan McQueen. I have two young children. We found out that we were on a well near CTS. The EPA started testing our well when my son was 6 months old, and he is now 6.5. So this has been going on for a long time. We helped ourselves to a water filter as soon as we found out about this. So we were excited about getting city water. I think it was, 2012 when we were promised that, but then they decided to go with water filters instead. I would love to be reimbursed for the water filter I bought, if that could be part of it. I have met with the OIG office from, are they coming from Charlotte? I'm not sure where those two guys are coming from. But they were incredibly patronizing, and I was with Miss Rice and my husband Tate McQueen, and it was like talking to a brick wall. It was very frustrating, and I'm worried that, it's hard for me to trust anyone from EPA. We've had people from Washington, D.C. come down as well, and we weren't sure if we were being investigated. It feels like the EPA does have teeth, and I think that was referring to how the EPA can handle pollution and corporations, but it feels like the EPA has had teeth with our community. I know there was a $50,000 grant, and that split the community groups in half, and the other community group was the one that was being contacted by Congress and whoever, where our community group was outcast, and we have 68,000 pages of documents. We've got it all. We've probably got table 2 for Jeff, where the EPA couldn't come up with it. So thank you so much for coming out to listen, and I hope that there can be some sort of reform. We've gotten nowhere with EPA Region 4. It feels like they're there to represent CTS versus what's going on with the community. As a result, my husband's decided to run for Congress. We didn't ask to get involved in any of this, but what we've uncovered is pointing to the fact that there really needs to be some sort of reform within the organization, because there's a lot of nepotism. It's going way back. The person that was discovering the contamination in the first place is now in charge of the cover-up of not cleaning up the contamination. Thank you for listening. Thanks for coming.
I think we will go ahead and try to wrap up, and I do want to just respond to your comment about the Charlotte folks. I don't personally know the details of that. I am going to make a guess that it's probably our investigators.
Tell me their names, I'll remember.
I actually wouldn't even know who the investigators are in Charlotte if they came from. Yeah, I'm sorry? RTP, that makes sense. I do know who our criminal investigators are there. I don't know which ones would have come down. Just to kind of give you a little perspective and background, my office is in a separate office from the investigator's office, which doesn't mean we don't talk to each other and we don't know what's going on, but we don't usually have reason to necessarily be in the weeds about what could be a criminal investigation they're doing, which is why I just wouldn't have the details on that. But I'm sorry that was your experience there. So they are, I'll just say, a different breed of, they are federal law enforcement officers, and if they are responding to what they think is a threatening situation, it may cause, a certain kind of reaction from them, but no excuse, and I'm sorry to hear that was your experience. Let me wrap up. Let me first start by responding to the question. I think it was what's next? What do we do next? So to give you a sense as to what our process is, we are in what's considered a preliminary research phase for this review. At the end of a 90-day period, which we're about at 30 days right now, we will make an assessment of the information that we've collected so far on the questions that we're looking at. We will make a decision whether it's time to report out on anything, whether we see anything that causes us to say, we need to report on this right away, we need to have EPA act, or we'll make a decision that we need to do some additional work. So it just depends upon what we collect during this next 60 days, essentially. So that's the process. I envision we will probably be issuing a report from the work that we're doing here. That could be up to a year if it's not something that we issue right away, if it's not something that we issue right away. I know our bosses make the same cringe face that you just made when we say it could take that long. But it does depend. I really want to emphasize it does depend what we hear. Let me sort of just recap the evening with a couple observations that I have. This was very, very enlightening for me. I very much appreciate the information and the honesty that I think you brought to us this evening. I don't consider you mouthy. I'm not offended personally by anything that anybody said or thought about who we are. I was really pleased to hear you say that you thought we were with the EPA. That's our fault. We probably should have found a better way to communicate who we are, what we do, how the OIG differs from the EPA. It's a subtlety thing. I can understand maybe why you approached the situation the way you did. I very much appreciate your candor about sort of telling folks not to show up. So with that said, though, I do very much appreciate the information that was shared. It is very helpful. It was very helpful for you to dig back and reach back. I'm taking away sort of some new insights from the information that you shared. This could cause us to reevaluate what we're doing and how we're approaching the questions that we're asking. So I do want to let you know it was worth your time very much, for me anyway, very much. Yes, sir.
How many people's involved in the evaluation, whatever you determine? Just these people here, or do you have 40 other people marked in DC, or is there 100 other people? Or?
No, this is the team, the folks that you...
Okay, you're the jury.
We do have one more, so she's actually...
when you go back to Washington, DC and get all your facts together,
yeah.
You're the jury. You're going to come back and say EPA's guilty, or they're not.
Well, here's the way, just to help you a little bit, I won't bore you with the details, but just to help you a little bit. That's right, that's the size of the team. We have another one. We actually have a hydrogeologist that is on our team, so we're recognizing the scientific complexities that go on here. We also have a really robust, really rigorous internal, we'll call it a quality assurance process. So other people have to review the conclusions that we reach. They have to check the facts that we reported. So we will obviously do complete due diligence to be sure that we present the facts as we see them. But there's others, we have levels of management that will review things. But this is the team that will be, that we're counting on to report out. So.
And two of us here are not on the team.
Yeah.
We're here to help with the communications and to be the liaisons with all of you and the press and the Congress.
So is this team just here just for this one day, or are you going to be here for 2 or 3 more days looking at the area, or what's?
Just today.
Just today.
Yeah, and I've been here twice before. This is my 3rd time to the site, and it was good. I've been here when the building was standing. I was in the building probably when I shouldn't have been in the building. I don't think anybody should have been in the building. But so I go back a ways there. So, but I think we did get a good, we call it a tour of the area, and we saw the neighborhoods that are being sampled. That's really good for our perspective. I was familiar with it. My team was less familiar with it, so I feel like we've seen what we do need to see at this point.
Well, I thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Are y'all going to consider the hydrologist from UNCA and go more in depth with him? Because he has done a tremendous amount of investigation himself, and he's a certified man, and I think it'd be great to go more in depth.
Yeah, I actually think I don't think Jeff is still here.
He's not there.
Yeah, I think in our past work, our hydrogeologist has been in touch with him. So, and based upon the information he shared, I'm pretty sure we would. And I think, like we said earlier, Jerry, we intend to. There may be things we heard here that we will want to follow up with people directly to get a little more information about. So, we just hope people will be willing to.
I don't think you've heard it all. I think the crowd would told you a lot more. In my videos, I think you would hear a lot, and it's not confined to 2012, because if you don't have the history, you ain't going forward. You can't go from 2012. You better have the history, and you better investigate well.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I do appreciate that. We have a good appreciation for that point. Okay,
I have one more question.
sure.
As far as what you're doing here, is the hope sitting in the balance of what your determination is? Because if your determination doesn't really come up with a whole lot of, stuff that EPA did wrong, does it just go back to square one and we're still stuck with the same situation? Is this contingent on what you find to get success later?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but let me sort of give you some perspective. EPA does respond to the recommendations we make, and this particular region, I think we've developed a fairly good working relationship with them, so they understand when we make recommendations that we don't make them, we make them with intention and we expect them to be implemented. So it just depends what the issue is. There was a number of things I heard here this evening about the pace of cleanup, which is within our purview right now, is something that we're looking at. I think it's a very, very legitimate, very serious matter. So I think we want to look a little bit more into that. So it could change things, it very well could.
There's also a forecast out for the winter being very, very bad here. And we saw the monsoon weather, if everybody remembers. We had 52 inches of rain. And that made a difference in what has happened. So now we're at half that amount to what we did have. So now it could be going in reverse to what it was. So I'm just wondering if these delays might be a purpose of the weather being at a certain point, because it changes the environment of underground water. So that needs to be taken into consideration too.
It does, yeah.
In the time frames.
At the end of the day, I think like a couple of folks in the audience recognize, this is a time-critical removal action, and those rules need to be followed. So, and maybe expedited under certain conditions. So.
I was just going to echo what Jerry said in terms of EPA could really benefit from Alliance from Wilcox and his study of this. He's had his classes, he's brought his students there for the last 3 or 4 years. So he's studied this site well. He knows a lot about cleanup options and things like that. And one of the things you got here right now that he was pressing that, they've recently, EPA has recently put out some information about the elm apple, and we're going to do a preliminary phase. We're going to deal with the elm apple first, and then we'll get to the big apple. And he made a very good point. He said, no, if you're going to get there, you're going to start digging, you're going to go for all of it, and you got to get that stuff, because that's the stuff that's going to migrate. And, but...
Barry, you got to dance the mic. We can't hear what you're saying.
Okay. I have a low voice, so I can...
Just to help folks, I think what we do want to do is be out of here by 8:30, so I just want to let everybody know it's 8:15, I think that we are.
Okay. What I was just saying, I don't know if you heard everything I said, but Dr. Wilcox is a very good source, but he had a different opinion. In fact, we had a meeting with 200 people where he described what Samantha was saying about elm apple and Dean apple, and he was amazing how she didn't actually understand some differences between elm apple and Dean apple. But the thing that I am concerned again about is that the technical proficiency of the team that's on this. CTS, you met him today, Matt Wallace is more proficient. And the problem is, and that's why Jeff and I talked about this, you need somebody. If Matt Wallace and Goals, who's this person in the CTS person, come up with a strategy and it's their cheapest strategy or their most cost-effective method, I feel that Samantha might just, without thinking about it, just sign off on it. And one of the things that Jeff mentioned, that she didn't even know when she put that there was this 1.1 billion that was found at a certain borehole that we recognized that we knew from a previous sampling. You really need a technically proficient team. And that's the frustration I told you earlier about when I went to the Vapor Intrusion Forum, how Region 4 did not have representatives there. And, you know, they rely on their start team, T&N Associates, their private contractors, but the people don't have, you know, so they're the ones reviewing something by someone who's more technically proficient, but also cost efficient. So we don't know if we're getting the best solution, and that's why somebody like Jeff, like Jerry mentioned, would be invaluable. But you need to look at this from a systemic point of view and a reform point of view, which is what's needed down here. Region 4. So thank you so much again.
In your evaluation, I just want to ask you, when you talk to EPA officials that have been involved in this site, are they under an obligation, legal obligation to, if they lie to you, or if they lead you astray under a obstruction of justice charge that can be brought against them? Because as Jerry said, he's got a lot of recordings, valuable resource. Almost everybody in this room has had interaction with the EPA, and we've been recorded, and that's, you know, people have mentioned criminality. I'm sure that there's been fraud, but are they under a legal obligation to tell you the truth? And if you find otherwise, do you refer that to criminal prosecution?
It's a slightly complicated answer. It's a slightly complicated answer. We don't swear people in when we're doing a standard interview. In my shop, it certainly wouldn't ever be a good idea to lie to the Inspector General. It just wouldn't be a good idea. They know that we have ways of confirming the information that they tell us. We can pull emails, we can pull all kinds of records, and so I think they know that, and we're aware of that, and we do that on a regular basis, but we certainly do it. Our investigators, and I cannot speak for our criminal investigators because it's not my area, but I think they do, since they're federal law enforcement officers, and I think a little bit heavier hand comes with when they're interviewing somebody, and the penalties for giving false information. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that answer, but.
Because they're giving false information to the community, not a crime, just a
Yeah.
lie. But, you know, I think since people have been sick and killed by the EPA's inactions, I think it's time to step it up. And, you know.
I understand.
I think he brings up a good point. We've not seen anybody held responsible for anything at this point. Nobody. Now, when we say held responsible, we find all kinds of things misleading, inaccurate, miscalculated, put in this place, that place, and some in the library, they didn't even have all the documentation in there. If
we have it now.
Yeah.
A lot of the documents have been tampered with, crossed out. 30 pages was put to the side, and they photocopied one page over and over again and put it in place. So there's a lot of tampered documents, and I understand that that is a broken law, but nobody is willing to pick up a case against the EPA because, as a girlfriend told me who's a lawyer in DC, you can't fight the EPA. And now I'm finding out what that means exactly. But we have documents that have been tampered with from these people, and we have all of the documents located at this point that we're missing.
And over in Asheville here, Buncombe County, in the library, that's where we found the documents. He took pictures of them, and if he hadn't took pictures of them, we wouldn't have had the documents because they took them out and then tried to represent them. And I went over to the library to investigate some other sites along with this that didn't even have the records. Now this is afterwards. This is even today. Go over and check out the Asheville Library. They said, well, after a certain amount of time, they take everything out. That right there is not good. So that's another way of looking at it. Everybody, government is everybody's trying to cover the other butt. Period. Sorry.
The record is a very, very important thing. And if it's removed or if it's altered or represented in a way that's not accurate, there's a problem here. And the thing that he was talking about, we did photograph the administrative record, which was bold, but it was presented with Bates and other pages, which the lawyer does to represent completeness. And we found out that document was incomplete. There were pages not part of it, and was not included in it. And so the thing I guess I would caution you again, and I talk about, you look at any one component here, and you can look at it in isolation and say, oh, okay, that, I can understand that, why that would happen, that's a mistake. But there is a litany of all kinds of stuff that have demonstrated a lack of forthcomingness and a concern about how they're handling this site. And I really do believe what I said earlier, that there is a very big mistake that happened, that people didn't make the right choices at the right time. And as a result, they put an enormous amount of energy to try to circumvent that fact. And time and money has been spent. I mean, I think the amount of dollars that were spent in the last 3 years, it's $9 million, and they haven't even lifted a shovel. And, you know, I think it's very, very important to address this. I mean, I understand it's very difficult for the federal government to hold an employee accountable in this way unless you catch them in a transaction, you know, something that's, you can catch them in a concrete way. If you look at the totality of how this site has been handled, this second site, the nondescript name given, the 293,000 parts per billion in the spring not responded to. Tagabus never entered the property. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I really do want to know why acetone, the two locations on all their maps that they presented from the acetone sample, they put non-detect for only two locations were on the Rice property. One where a family was just removed from a trailer, and one where two kids at the time were 1 and 2 years old. And that was not represented in 3 reports. And I think I sent that to the CID folks. And this is important stuff, but if you look at anything in isolation, you can make an excuse for it. But if you look at the totality of what's happened here, there's something here. And I understand, I'll use this metaphor that you use about stovepiping an investigation. But if there's smoke, there's fire. And I think you have to broaden your perspective on this and look at the larger picture. For public interest, for the importance of the agency, and for the purpose that you do your job in the first place, to keep this agency straight and on track and doing what it's supposed to be doing to protect the public. And that's what's not happened here.
Thank you very much.
I have one question. Are you willing to accept Jerry's tapes before you start your investigation?
I'm sorry, which tapes?
Before you start your interviewing the EPA people?
He's talking about my tapes that I've taped over the years.
Your personal tapes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Of all the meetings.
Of all the meetings with
Oh,
the
is this
EPA?
up on YouTube?
Do what?
Are these up on YouTube?
Some of them are.
I think we could discuss it. I can't see any problem with that. I think if this is information.
I don't want to waste my time gathering something if you ain't going to use it.
Let's talk, maybe we can talk further about what's in that and what you see as useful for our perspective. We'd be happy to talk about that. I don't want to ask somebody, yes, go put it together, and then we've asked you to do something that may not be useful, but we'd like to talk about that, I think. Okay, thank you. Well, we've asked our gentleman up there who's been helping us with the sound, and he's probably staying later than he thought he was going to have to stay this evening. He's still up there, so we'll go ahead and close. And once again, I want to thank everybody for showing up. I thought you did a terrific job. You're very brave folks, very courageous, and you need to keep up your hard work and don't give up. Thank you.
Thank you.